The galaxy had forgotten what a human war looked like. That was not because humanity had been defeated, or because its armies had faded into legend. It was because, for 15,000 uninterrupted years, not a single human fleet had fired the first shot. Entire civilizations had risen, conquered stars, collapsed into dust, and been replaced by younger empires that knew humanity only as quiet diplomats, tireless explorers, and patient builders. Children on distant worlds learned that humans were the architects of peace, the species that mediated impossible disputes, rebuilt shattered colonies, and carried medicine farther than any warship had ever traveled. Museums displayed rusted fragments of ancient human battleships like relics from a forgotten age, while scholars debated whether the terrifying stories of Earth's military were exaggerated myths meant to frighten reckless politicians. No one alive had ever witnessed humanity's fury. Most believed it had never truly existed. Then the broadcast began. Without warning, every communication relay across the Orion Reach flickered. Trade negotiations froze mid-sentence. Starliners paused their entertainment feeds. Military command centers watched their tactical displays dissolve into static before a single unfamiliar symbol emerged in perfect silence, the crest of the Galactic Council. Billions of eyes turned toward glowing screens scattered across worlds of crystal forests, floating oceans, artificial ring habitats, and cities that stretched into the clouds. The transmission carried no music. No introduction. Only a sterile voice that echoed with cold authority. For the continued stability of the galaxy. The image sharpened. Rows of human children stood behind shimmering containment barriers, their small hands pressed against transparent energy walls that shimmered with pale blue light. Some were barely old enough to understand where they were. Others clutched younger siblings, forcing themselves to appear brave despite tears running silently down frightened faces. Their clothes were wrinkled from travel, their expressions frozen between confusion and fear. Around them stood towering council security officers clad in polished armor, their weapons lowered, not because they felt mercy, but because they believed resistance was impossible. The announcer continued as though reading a routine administrative report. These juvenile specimens have been peacefully transferred into galactic educational custody for cultural integration and behavioral refinement. Humanity will comply with all council directives to ensure their safe development. The word struck like vacuum ripping the air from a ship. Across Earth, conversations stopped. In crowded megacities, workers stared motionless at enormous holographic billboards. Deep beneath the oceans, research stations fell eerily silent. Lunar colonies watched without speaking. Families gathered around dinner tables simply froze, unable to process what they were seeing. Somewhere, a mother recognized her daughter's frightened face. Somewhere else, a father collapsed into his chair as his son's name appeared in the council registry scrolling beneath the broadcast. No screams came. No riots erupted. Only silence. A silence so complete it felt unnatural. Because every human watching understood the same terrible truth at exactly the same moment. They hadn't taken prisoners. They had taken children. Far beyond Earth's atmosphere, hidden satellites that had remained dormant for thousands of years awakened without receiving a single visible command. Ancient quantum beacons pulsed once into the darkness between stars. Deep beneath Antarctic ice older than recorded civilization, sealed vault doors released their locks with thunderous echoes that had not been heard for 15 millennia. The galaxy waited for diplomats. Humanity answered with awakening machinery. And somewhere, in the endless darkness between the stars, history opened its eyes once again. Deep beneath the endless white silence of Antarctica, where glaciers concealed secrets older than recorded civilization, an elevator descended through layers of ice, bedrock, and forgotten history. The walls vibrated with a low mechanical hum that hadn't echoed through these tunnels in 15,000 years. Standing alone inside the lift was Admiral Elena Hayes, her face illuminated by the cold glow of the descending display. Every number that disappeared above her represented another century of peace. Every kilometer carried her closer to a part of humanity the galaxy believed no longer existed. Her breathing was steady, but her thoughts were anything but. On the small holographic screen mounted inside the elevator, the image of the kidnapped children remained frozen. Tiny faces. Trembling hands. Eyes searching for parents who were light years away. The elevator stopped. A deep metallic tone rolled through the underground chamber. Massive titanium doors, each hundreds of meters thick, slowly separated with the grinding weight of forgotten centuries. Dust drifted through the air like pale ghosts as ancient floodlights awakened one by one, casting long blue beams across an impossible cavern. Admiral Hayes stepped forward, her boots echoing across polished black stone. The last arsenal. History books called it a myth. Politicians had dismissed it as propaganda. Even most human military officers believed it had been dismantled long ago under the Great Peace Accord. They had all been wrong. Before her stretched an underground city unlike anything the modern galaxy had ever seen. Endless rows of silent warships rested inside colossal docking cradles carved directly into the mountain. Towering combat walkers stood frozen in perfect formation, their armor untouched by rust or time. Autonomous repair drones hung motionless from ceiling rails, waiting patiently for a command that had never come. Massive reactors, sealed behind transparent alloy walls, pulsed faintly beneath layers of protective shielding, as if enormous hearts had continued beating quietly through 15,000 years of sleep. Then, one by one, the lights turned green. A calm artificial voice, ancient yet flawless, filled the cavern. Authorization confirmed. Supreme Defense Protocol Omega. Peace status, terminated. Across the chamber, machines awakened. Power conduits ignited in cascading waves of blue light. Massive engines began their slow, thunderous startup cycles. Robotic maintenance units descended from the ceiling, immediately surrounding dormant warships with practiced precision. Holographic tactical displays burst into existence, projecting star maps that hadn't been used since humanity's final Great War. The arsenal had not aged. It had waited. Far above, Earth itself was changing. Orbital shipyards that had spent centuries constructing scientific observatories, deep space hospitals, agricultural habitats, and exploration cruisers suddenly shifted purpose with breathtaking efficiency. Entire manufacturing rings rotated into new configurations. Civilian fabrication drones abandoned peaceful designs and began assembling armored hull sections measured in kilometers. Freight elevators launched continuously from the surface, carrying materials that had quietly been reserved for an emergency no one believed would ever arrive. Citizens watched from city rooftops as peaceful stations surrounding Earth unfolded hidden weapon systems beneath layers of elegant architecture. Massive defensive arrays emerged from structures that had always appeared to be harmless communication platforms. The transformation was silent, almost graceful. There was no celebration. No speeches. No calls for revenge. Only determination. Families gathered in homes across Earth, holding one another while the faces of the missing children remained on every screen. Volunteers lined up outside emergency response centers. Engineers reported to forgotten military divisions. Doctors prepared hospital fleets before the first battle had even begun. Humanity was not rushing toward war with hatred in its heart. It was moving with purpose. Because there existed one law older than governments, stronger than treaties, and deeper than civilization itself. A child must come home. As Admiral Hayes looked across the awakening arsenal, she understood the terrible responsibility now resting upon her shoulders. Humanity had spent 15,000 years proving to the galaxy that peace was its greatest strength. Now the galaxy was about to discover what humanity had sacrificed to preserve it. The Galactic Council believed the crisis was already over. From the gleaming halls of its capital station, a city-sized structure suspended above the radiant world of Lyran Prime, senior delegates congratulated one another on what they proudly called a necessary demonstration of authority. Towering windows overlooked endless streams of civilian traffic weaving through the stars, while inside, polished marble floors reflected the glow of floating holograms displaying humanity's complete strategic isolation. Fleet admirals pointed confidently at tactical projections. Earth was surrounded. Every major jump corridor had been sealed. Long-range communications were monitored. Supply routes were under Council supervision. According to every calculation, humanity had nowhere to go, no allies willing to intervene, and no realistic chance of recovering children who had already been scattered across dozens of heavily fortified Academy worlds. The operation was flawless, at least on paper. Far away from those elegant chambers, reality looked very different. The kidnapped children had been separated with clinical precision. Brothers and sisters who had cried for each other during transport now found themselves light years apart. Some were confined inside pristine educational compounds orbiting gas giants, where smiling instructors spoke calmly about peaceful integration, while armed guards stood behind every classroom door. Others were transferred to remote research colonies hidden inside asteroid belts, their names replaced by identification numbers in sterile databases. They were told that Earth had willingly surrendered them. That their parents had abandoned them for the greater good of galactic stability. Some believed the lie. Others never stopped waiting. A little girl pressed her hand against the transparent wall of her room and stared into the endless stars outside. Somewhere beyond that darkness was home. Somewhere, her mother was searching. She whispered only one word. Mom. Back on Earth, that whisper would never be heard. But somehow, it was felt. Across the planet, millions of parents lived in unbearable silence. Children's bedrooms remained untouched. Toys sat exactly where they had been left. Family dinner tables held empty chairs that no one could bear to remove. Entire neighborhoods had become unnaturally quiet, as though the world itself was holding its breath. Every missing child had become every family's child. Grief no longer belonged to individuals. It belonged to humanity. Meanwhile, Council intelligence officers began receiving reports they couldn't explain. Tiny fluctuations in gravitational fields appeared near the edge of human-controlled space. Then another. And another. Long-range observatories detected microscopic distortions that vanished before scanners could identify their source. Ancient navigation buoys, inactive for thousands of years, suddenly transmitted encrypted bursts lasting less than a millisecond before falling silent again. Deep space listening stations reported hearing low-frequency resonance waves moving through the void itself, sounds that matched no known propulsion system in the Council's archives. The reports reached Fleet Command. Most officers laughed. Leftover defense satellites, one admiral dismissed. Psychological warfare, another concluded. They're trying to frighten us. The files were archived. Ignored. No one considered the impossible. No one asked why phenomena that had remained dormant for 15,000 years were suddenly appearing all at once. Hidden beneath Earth's deepest oceans, beneath mountain ranges, beneath forgotten deserts and frozen continents, colossal structures continued awakening in absolute secrecy. Endless assembly lines moved without human supervision. Quantum reactors reached full output one by one. Artificial intelligences, older than nearly every civilization in the galaxy, silently synchronized across interstellar distances. No alarms sounded. No announcements were made. Only preparation. Admiral Elena Hayes stood inside the last Arsenal's central command chamber, watching thousands of blinking indicators gradually turn from red, to amber, to green. Every light represented another system returning to life. Another fleet becoming operational. Another chapter of history refusing to stay buried. A young communications officer approached her carefully. "Admiral," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper, "the Council believes we're preparing for a defensive war." Hayes never looked away from the tactical display. Her expression remained perfectly calm. "They're still thinking like politicians." She watched hundreds of hidden fleet icons slowly emerge across the star map. They haven't realized. Her voice became almost inaudible. This was never about defending Earth. The room fell silent. Because every officer present already understood the mission. They weren't preparing to win a war. They were preparing to bring the children home. No matter what stood in their way. The first crack did not appear on a battlefield. It appeared inside the Galactic Council's Hall of Accord, where confidence had always sounded louder than caution. Delegates filled the vast circular chamber beneath a living dome of stars, each representative convinced that humanity's silence was proof of surrender. Military analysts presented reassuring forecasts. Economic advisors predicted Earth's compliance within days. Even the Council's oldest species, whose ancestors had once witnessed humanity's final war 15 millennia earlier, remained strangely quiet, their expressions unreadable as younger civilizations celebrated a victory they believed was already written. Then the legal archive awakened. Without warning, the chamber lights dimmed. Ancient holographic projectors, systems so old they had become part of the architecture itself, activated automatically. Streams of forgotten treaty records poured into the air, each document glowing with pale silver light. The Council's Central Intelligence had received an authentication request from Earth, one that demanded verification of the original peace accord in its complete, unedited form. At first, officials smiled. Let them read history, one delegate laughed. It changes nothing. But the archive kept searching. Thousands of encrypted seals unlocked one after another. Entire sections that no living politician had ever bothered to examine unfolded across the chamber. Dust-covered legal annotations, preserved for 15,000 years, emerged from the treaty's forgotten foundation. Then the system paused. A single clause expanded into enormous letters above every delegate. Emergency Article 7. Silence spread through the chamber. The ancient text was unmistakable. Asterisk, should any signatory civilization knowingly seize, imprison, indoctrinate, or otherwise weaponize human children against the sovereign will of humanity, all restrictions imposed upon the Human Defense Authority shall become permanently null and void. Humanity shall immediately regain unrestricted military sovereignty under universal law. No signatory shall possess legal authority to oppose such restoration. Asterisk. No one spoke. One delegate blinked in disbelief. Another hurriedly searched the treaty summary on his personal display. The clause wasn't there. It had never been copied into the simplified version studied by modern governments. An elderly historian from one of the founding civilizations slowly rose to his feet. His hands trembled, not from age, but from memory. I remember. He whispered. The chamber turned toward him. I remember why they insisted this clause remain. His voice grew heavier with every word. They said there was only one thing capable of ending 15,000 years of peace. He looked toward the frozen image of the human children still suspended above the chamber. And we have just done it. Panic rippled through the council. Emergency transmissions flooded military headquarters. Orders were issued to reinforce occupied systems. Fleet commanders demanded updated intelligence. But before new defenses could even be organized, deep space observatories began reporting impossible readings. Entire regions of empty space were disappearing. Not exploding. Not collapsing. Simply vanishing behind enormous shadows that scanners could not measure. At the edge of known space, black fractures silently opened across the fabric of reality itself. They resembled neither jump gates nor wormholes. They were wounds, perfect geometric tears stretching for thousands of kilometers, glowing with cold blue energy that seemed older than the stars surrounding them. Then something moved. A ship emerged. Then another. Then hundreds. Then thousands. They came without formation lights, without identification signals, without a single broadcast. Colossal vessels unlike anything in modern records drifted through the dimensional fractures with terrifying calm. Their armor bore no fresh paint, no ceremonial markings, only scars carved by wars so ancient that every civilization alive believed they belonged to mythology. Entire fleets followed them, stretching beyond sensor range, each vessel preserved in absolute perfection by autonomous intelligences that had guarded them in folded dimensions for 15 millennia. The impossible truth spread faster than fear itself. Humanity had never dismantled its legendary armadas. It had hidden them. Not out of deception. Out of hope. Hope that no generation would ever have to awaken them again. Deep inside the last arsenal, Admiral Elena Hayes watched the tactical display transform. Thousands of dormant fleet signatures blinked into existence across the galaxy, linking together like constellations returning to the night sky. Every hidden battle group acknowledged command within seconds. Ancient artificial commanders reported full operational readiness. Supply chains, dormant longer than recorded history, came alive with flawless precision. A young officer stared at the overwhelming display, barely able to find his voice. "Admiral." He swallowed hard. "How long have they been waiting?" Hayes looked at the silent armadas filling the holographic stars. Her answer came almost like a prayer. 15,000 years. She paused. And they never wanted to wake. No declaration of war was ever transmitted. No speeches echoed across the stars. No triumphant music accompanied the launch of humanity's fleets. There was only a single encrypted command, carried through quantum relays that had slept beneath the galaxy for 15,000 years. Operation Homecoming. Every human vessel acknowledged the order with one brief signal. Then the stars moved. Across dozens of sectors, dimensional fractures blossomed open in absolute silence. Ancient human armadas emerged with unnerving precision, not charging recklessly into battle, but appearing exactly where they needed to be. Council surveillance stations vanished behind walls of electronic interference before alarms could even finish sounding. Navigation grids were rewritten in milliseconds. Enemy communications dissolved into meaningless static. The galaxy had prepared for overwhelming firepower. It had not prepared for overwhelming intelligence. Inside the flagship Resolute Dawn, Admiral Elena Hayes stood before a living tactical display stretching from floor to ceiling. Thousands of glowing markers represented the kidnapped children, each one isolated on a different world, station, or orbital academy. Every rescue team had one objective. Not victory. Not conquest. One child. One family. One journey home. "Remember," Hayes said quietly over the fleet-wide channel. Her voice carried no anger, only absolute certainty. "Civilian casualties are unacceptable. We are not here for revenge." She paused. "We are here for our children." Thousands of acknowledgments answered at once. Then humanity disappeared into the darkness. The first Council defense fleet never understood what happened. Their battleships locked weapons onto approaching human signatures, expecting the brutal exchange of fire described in ancient history texts. Instead, every targeting system suddenly went blind. Missile launchers refused commands. Reactor outputs fell to harmless idle levels. Rail cannons powered down one after another as invisible quantum algorithms quietly unraveled the software controlling every weapon. Entire armadas drifted helplessly through space. No explosions. No destruction. Only silence. Council commanders stared in disbelief. "Our weapons. They're gone." Engineers scrambled through control rooms, rerouting power manually, replacing processors, overriding safeties. Nothing worked. Humanity had spent 15,000 peaceful years studying technology instead of warfare. Now the two had become the same thing. Across occupied systems, sleek black rescue craft slipped through disabled defenses like shadows crossing moonlight. Elite retrieval teams landed with breathtaking precision, their armored boots touching alien soil for the first time in millennia. Every movement was rehearsed. Every second calculated. Inside one distant academy, frightened children huddled together as emergency lights flashed crimson overhead. Teachers shouted conflicting orders. Security officers reached for powerless weapons. Then the reinforced entrance slowly opened. For one terrifying moment, silence filled the room. A human soldier stepped inside. His rifle remained lowered. Behind his battle helmet, his voice was gentle. "We're taking you home." A little boy blinked in disbelief. "You found us?" The soldier knelt to meet his eyes. "We never stopped looking." The child ran forward without hesitation. The soldier caught him with one arm while signaling the rest of the team to secure the remaining children. Across the room, another operator wrapped a frightened little girl in an emergency thermal blanket. A medic checked each child before they boarded evacuation transports. No one was left behind. Not one. Across the galaxy, the same scene unfolded hundreds of times. Parents' names were spoken. Hands reached out. Tears flowed freely beneath battle helmets. Human soldiers carried exhausted children through smoke-filled corridors while disabled enemy fleets floated uselessly above silent worlds. Only when several Council admirals attempted a desperate counterattack did humanity reveal the final measure of its restraint. Ancient defense platforms hidden between stars awakened. Not to destroy. To end the fight. Brilliant waves of pale blue energy spread across entire sectors, passing harmlessly through civilian worlds while instantly shutting down every hostile military system they touched. Battleships fell dark. Carrier groups lost propulsion. Orbital fortresses became lifeless monuments drifting through space. An entire military civilization had been defeated. Without being annihilated. On the bridge of the Resolute Dawn, officers watched green rescue icons appear one after another across the tactical display. Sector 12. Recovered. Sector 21. Recovered. Sector 48. Recovered. One by one, every stolen child crossed safely back into human protection. At last, only a single marker remained. The command deck became perfectly still. Then, it turned green. No cheers erupted. No celebration broke the silence. Only exhausted relief. Admiral Hayes slowly closed her eyes. For the first time since the Council's broadcast, she allowed herself a single breath. "The children are safe," whispered the communications officer. Hayes looked toward the stars beyond the bridge viewport, where humanity's ancient fleets waited in perfect formation. 15,000 years of peace had not made humanity weak. It had made humanity patient. And when that patience was finally broken, the galaxy learned the difference between a civilization that sought war and one that would cross eternity to bring its children home. The final rescue shuttle pierced Earth's atmosphere beneath a sky painted gold by the setting sun. Its scorched hull glowed crimson as it descended through layers of cloud, escorted by silent formations of human fighters that never broke rank. Across the planet, every screen abandoned its regular broadcasts to follow the lone craft in real time. Cities paused. Spaceports fell quiet. Construction drones hovered motionless in the air. From the frozen research stations of Antarctica to the floating habitats above the Pacific, billions of people waited without speaking. There would be no victory parade. No fireworks. Only one question echoed inside every human heart. Did they all come home? The shuttle settled gently onto landing platform 1 outside the United Earth Assembly. The engines faded into silence. For one long moment, nothing happened. Then the hatch opened. A small girl stepped onto the ramp, clutching a worn stuffed rabbit she had carried throughout her captivity. She looked around uncertainly, her eyes adjusting to the familiar blue sky she thought she might never see again. At the edge of the landing zone, a woman broke through the security line. "Emily." The child turned. "Mom." They ran toward one another, meeting halfway with a force that sent them both to their knees. Around them, soldiers quietly looked away as tears blurred their vision. Other families rushed forward. Fathers embraced sons who had grown thinner but never lost hope. Brothers and sisters found each other after believing they had been scattered forever. Cries of relief mixed with laughter and uncontrollable sobs, echoing across the landing field like music no composer could ever write. Admiral Elena Hayes stood several steps back, her uniform stained with smoke and exhaustion. She watched reunion after reunion unfold without interrupting a single moment. This, not fleets, not strategy, not victory, had always been the mission. One young boy noticed her standing alone. He walked over slowly, still holding his father's hand. "Are you the one who brought us home?" he asked. Hayes hesitated. Then she smiled gently. "No," she answered. "Humanity did." Far beyond Earth's atmosphere, the ancient armadas remained motionless against the stars. Their colossal silhouettes stretched across orbit like sleeping giants, their weapons powered down once more. One by one, the dimensional gateways reopened. Without celebration or ceremony, the legendary fleets turned toward the darkness from which they had emerged. They did not linger to demand tribute. They did not occupy conquered worlds. They simply disappeared back into the hidden reaches between dimensions, returning to the long silence they had always hoped would never be broken again. Across the galaxy, disbelief slowly gave way to reflection. The Galactic Council, once convinced of its own permanence, collapsed under the weight of its arrogance. Member worlds withdrew their support almost overnight. Delegates who had applauded the seizure of innocent children now faced public outrage from their own citizens, many of whom had watched humanity risk everything without seeking revenge. New leaders rose in their place, not warriors hungry for power, but diplomats determined never to repeat such a catastrophic mistake. Memorials were erected not to commemorate a great battle, but to remember the day pride nearly destroyed an age of peace. Days later, a final transmission reached every inhabited world. There was no threat in the message. No demand for reparations. No declaration of superiority. Only Admiral Hayes standing before a quiet backdrop of stars. Her voice was calm. Measured. "We did not build 15,000 years of peace because we forgot how to fight." She paused, letting the silence carry the weight of history. "We built it because we learned what war costs." Images appeared behind her, children laughing, families reunited, rescue teams carrying the smallest survivors into waiting arms. Our strength has never been our fleets. It has never been our weapons. It has always been our choice. Her eyes met the camera. And peace is still our choice. The transmission ended. For a long time, no one spoke. Across thousands of worlds, parents quietly gathered their children a little closer. Teachers rewrote history lessons. Military academies replaced old doctrines with a single enduring principle: power without compassion is fragile, but compassion protected by strength can preserve civilizations. And for the next 15,000 years, whenever young voices asked why humanity was respected across the stars, the answer was always the same. Not because humans won the war. But because, when they had every reason to conquer the galaxy, they chose to bring their children home. And then chose peace once again.